Hey team, Mike here at After 40 Fitness and after40fitness.ca. In response to that video I put out just last week on is too much protein a real thing? I personally think it's a total myth. And man, you got to be in excess of 2, if not 300 grams of protein in a day before there's even the realm of the possibility of too much protein. It really is just fear, it's dogma. But on top of that, do hit that subscribe button and don't forget the bell icon and hit notifications. I don't know why, but YouTube is no longer showing videos. If you just click subscribe, you actually have to go in a bell and then hit all for notifications. So you'll know when I put out 2 or 3 videos a week. But on that note, here's the question. I'll show it to you. It's from Alyssa. So this again is in response to my video on if there's such a thing as too much protein. Notice she said, do you know how little protein is acceptable for us? And she says, I'm a work in progress. I couldn't imagine eating enough protein for my weight. I'm looking for some guidance. So if you recall from that, if you did see that last video, if you haven't, I'll put a link down below. Go watch that one. Right? We'll talk about what too much is. But in essence, you want to be somewhere between, if you're in the States, somewhere between 0.8 and 1 gram a day. You can decide based on your activity. But even as high as 1.2 if you're active. If you're doing something active every day, be that HIIT or resistance training of some kind. If you ever use the phrase too much protein in relation to someone who says, you know, my macro is 100 and I went to 110, if I find out that you said that's too much protein and you're going to kick yourself out of ketosis, I'm going to reach right through my computer and slap you. I wish I could. I honestly wish I could. Be warned. Anyway, so 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound if you're in the U.S. and for kilograms for us Canadians and the rest of the world, you Americans are funny, that works out to somewhere in the air of about 1.6 grams per kilo, 1.6 if you're sedentary, and as much as 2 grams per kilo if you're active, as we talked about, in some way, shape, or form. So to Alyssa's point, she looked at those numbers and said, I can't imagine eating enough protein for my weight. At what point does my lack of hitting that number, at what point does my low protein become deleterious? So I took that challenge of trying to find out at what point protein was too little and what you could expect from it. So let's start with that first. I actually put together a bunch of websites and compiled a list of 17 possible side effects if your protein is too low. So I'm going to run through the 17 very quickly. And I just want you to, as I run through them, ask yourself if 2 or 3 apply to you. Because on their own, any one of these 17 could be one of 100 things. But if you have, let's say, of the 17, 3, 4, or more, then you seriously want to have a look at your protein and consider the option of adding 10 or 15 or 20% more. Make sense? That's got to be cool, right? So let's get after it and let's look at the list. And number 1, as you would expect, I started most obvious with muscle loss. The problem with muscle loss is you can't tell. Right? Unless you have the ability like I do here in Saskatchewan to go to the University of Saskatchewan and go to the kinesiology lab, pay $100 and get a DEXA scan done. So if you get a DEXA scan done where they x-ray your entire body, they can tell you, left arm versus right arm, left leg versus left leg, your muscle mass, and not only give you a body fat weight, body fat percentage, but also your fat-free mass. How else can you tell? And yet muscle loss is by far the biggest impact of not enough protein. A, you can't tell. B, it's insidious. C, it's exacerbated by age. That's called sarcopenia. You can look that up. Sarcopenia is muscle and strength loss just because we're aging. And the only way to stop it, there's only 2 ways to do it. Number 1 is resistance training. You must spark or stimulate muscle protein synthesis, which is muscle building, and then feed that process with adequate protein. All right, that's number 1. Number 2, aches and pains. Aches and pains, and that goes one step further into too many injuries. If you find yourself injury prone, chances are it is going to be tied to not enough calories, but particularly not enough protein. Remarkable. Let's talk about hunger. Hunger is a phenomenal one because you would think in the keto Atkins space we wouldn't have hunger. We shouldn't. But if you do, if beyond the phase of being keto adapted or fat adapted, you have hunger, that is your body jonesing for metabolites, jonesing for nutrition. You want to do a search for the PE diet. I'll show a glimpse of it here by Dr. Ted Naiman. He explains that we end up overeating energy to get our amino acids up. So if our diet, back to the days when you and I were in the SAD diet, we would overeat carbs and fat because they were in such abundance in order to get the only time we were ever full was when we hit some threshold of amino acids. Again, our body will continue to make us ravenously hungry, if not hangry, until we get an adequate level. And so if you're hungry, I'm going to tell you something, you need to get some protein in you. Stat. That's all there is to it. Next is sleep issues. I don't know if you know this or not, but insomnia, broken sleep, poor REM, If you have sleep issues, chances are you are also low on protein. This one goes back to injuries, but it's particularly fractures and breaks. So I don't know if you know this or not, but we were taught as kids, right, that calcium makes strong bones. You need to know this. That's not the case. Amino acids are by far the predominant mixture or ingredient in bones. So when we become low on protein, then it can easily lead to increased amount of fractures and breaks. Next up, number 6, was headaches. Oh, I got to put a link down to this below. It's remarkable what low protein does, how it affects so many hormones, not to mention our blood pressure. If you, let's say your protein macro is 80, add 20% more grams. So if we're at 80, go to 95. Try 95 for a month and see if that helps alleviate headaches. If not, then your cause wasn't low protein, but who knows? You might just rule it out. And if it helps you relieve headache pain or frequency of headaches, how good is that? Oh my God, win-win. Number 7, hair, nails, and skin. So I often talk about this, about how the body, when it gets a low amount of amino acids, it has to prioritize where they go. Just so you know, hair, nails, and skin all require protein. All of them. So if you find your hair is falling out, or it's losing its sheen, its luster, ladies, you know what I'm talking about. I don't. Nails get brittle, and skin, the maintenance of our skin is all amino acid based. It's collagen. Collagen being an amino acid, or an amino acid blend. You will have skin issues, skin problems, and you will premature age if your amino acids are low. If your amino acid pool is depleted, aka not enough protein. Swelling. This one's interesting. I was surprised to find out that edema, swelling in any of the joints, not to mention inflammation in the joints caused by swelling, is a large symptom of a condition of low protein. Protein and amino acids play a huge role in modulating swelling. So good. Number 9, fatigue. Who would have guessed? I thought that was low energy. Turns out that that's exacerbated by low protein. So if you're tired throughout the day, despite being keto, low-carb Atkins, then you need to up your protein. Number 10, slower metabolism, aka stalling or plateauing. So in the last video, I showed a clip of Thomas DeLauer saying that if you've stalled, what you want to do is up your protein. One of the things you don't want to do is further increase your caloric deficit. Don't do that. Right? If you're going to increase your caloric deficit, you do it via exercise. But if you've plateaued or stalled and you decide to drop your calories another 100 or 200, that's a game you cannot win. Number 11 was compromised immune system. In other words, you're frequently ill, you frequently catch colds. So our immune system is largely built on amino acids. But it's amazing how when our protein gets low, we become sicker more often. Number 12, mood swings. Mood swings. Oddly enough, amino acids play such a role in the body, it is just remarkable. The more I look into this topic, the more I'm amazed. And sure enough, they don't also play a role up in the brain. If amino acids, some in particular, glutamine, glutamate, are amino acids that take care of our dopamine, our serotonin, our epinephrine, all of those catecholamines are all impacted by low amino acids, aka low protein. And that results in mood swings, and typically not just mood swings, but mood swings for the worse. Anxiety, depression, right? Overall, low protein just makes us no fun to hang around, really. All right, number 13 was slow healing. Slow healing. So this is tough to tell as well. If you're like me, you have no idea if you slow heal or not. But what you want to do then is the next time you cut yourself, time it. Time it from the day you cut it to the day it is invisible, it's healed, and then compare that with somebody else. Call up a couple of your friends and say, any idea when you cut yourself, how long does it take to heal? I'll tell you something. I, at 51, heal much slower than my son. My son and I were out one day, we were working the heavy bag, and we both normally we wear gloves, right? We normally have 12-ounce gloves on when we work the heavy bag. But we both decided not to bother. We just decided to throw combos at the bag for about a half hour, my 15-year-old son and I. And we both did a good job of scraping our knuckles, right? And I mean raw. Well, sure enough, a week later, I'm looking at my knuckles, and they're still scabbed. And I just happened to look over at my son's, and I couldn't believe it. Like his knuckles a week later were back to normal. But there's an example of how quickly I can compare to somebody else. You want to do that to see if your protein is low. Next, energy levels. Energy level. We talked about lethargy, but never mind just lethargy. We're talking about energy levels when you should have energy, i.e. you're not making any gains in the gym. Right? If you can't go for another 2 minutes on the treadmill or at higher intensity, or you sputter mid-workout, if you're having a hard time keeping your game face on when you're under the bench press or when you're doing squats, or my goodness, you're tired all the time, that goes beyond just lethargy. That is now tired when you shouldn't be tired. That is tired when you need to have energy. Next, you can't focus. Again, we talked about brain and serotonin and dopamine. Well, this one goes one step further. It's not just mood swings anymore in your head. Now we're actually talking about you can't focus. You have a hard time staying fixated on something. Right? If that's the case, consider that your protein may be low. 16 was liver issues. And unfortunately, unless you get this checked, right, if you go in for some blood work and you get some liver stats done, this one you can't tell. But liver issues, if you do go get liver stats done and you find your ALT, your AST, and etc., your creatinine levels, your GFR in your kidneys, right? There's another one. Excuse me. Those are all exacerbated by low protein. And 17, last one, anemia. Oddly enough, I had no idea. Again, this is something you'll have to get checked by a doctor. Several sources said that low protein, low amino acids, reduces the body's ability to produce red blood cells. And low red blood cell count is referred to as anemia. The next time you go in and get blood work done, make sure you say to your doctor, please check me for anemia, check me for liver and kidney stats, and let's compare against a normal person and see if I'm low. Right? Great indicator of your protein count. All right, so on that note, there's the list of 17. Again, if you listed more than, let's say, 4 or 5 as yeses of that list of 17, then you should consider taking a month, adding 10 or 15% more grams of protein, and seeing if you can come back to this video in a month and check off less. I had a very hard time coming up with studies. It doesn't seem that anybody's done any studies on how low protein can go. All the research seems to be right on how much protein can we safely ingest. No one seems to be looking at the other end. So here's one, for example, from the journal Food and Function. The title is Dietary Protein Intake and Human Health. And what they did here was if you notice across the top, I didn't highlight, but obese women in a 16-week study, and they put them in various exercise programs with various protein levels, 10, 12, 15, and 20. The authors found that subjects in the high exercise protein lost group, both the 15 and the 20%, by the way, lost body fat, but no loss of lean mass, whereas subjects in the low groups, 10 and 12, both lost not only fat, but also muscle. Let that sink in for a second. These in various intensities of exercise included resistance training, included weight-bearing exercise, and yet at 10 and 12% body fat, they still lost muscle. Skeletal muscle being muscle on our skeleton, right, that we need. Can't afford to lose any. So as for Alyssa's question, how do we now turn this information, minus all the symptoms, because Alyssa, like every one of you, can go through there and do the comparison of the 17 symptoms that seem to indicate low protein and decide whether or not you need to up yours. But to Alyssa's question of how low is safe, remember, I've already admonished Alyssa to be at 1 gram per pound. So let's be hypothetical. I don't know Alyssa and she didn't say, but let's say for argument's sake that she's 150 pounds. Let's also say that she uses 1,500 as her basal metabolic rate worth of calories per day. So we have our two metrics. We have 150 pounds and we have 1,500 calories. Well, you know that the recommendation, based on my last video and based on prevailing science, is that she could aim for as high as 150 grams a day, assuming some activity. Assuming regular but frequent activity, 150 safe. She could be around 130 at 0.8 grams per pound, but that assumes that Alyssa's sedentary, and I'm not going to assume that. That's on the high end, and Alyssa's question was, where can she go on the other end of the spectrum safely without health risks, right? I can't say, because again, it's individual, and based on this information, it's tough to say, because that list of 17 possible symptoms could kick in at different times for different people. However, what I did gather from this is that 15% of calories from protein seems to be the low end. Right? At 10%, we showed there will be muscle loss. At 10%, you can't stop it at 10%, even with the resistance program. 15% of calories of the 1,500, 225 calories. 225. That's pretty simple. So, Alyssa, you need to aim for 225 calories from protein per day. Well, since there's 4 calories for every gram, that's simple. That's 55 grams. I've now determined that based on this information, which is all I've got, is that Alyssa needs to be at a minimum of 55. If she goes below 55, I expect that Alyssa will have physiological impacts. She will have deleterious and detrimental and dangerous impacts from below 55 grams per day. However, what a window. I mean, look at the slice at how big that is between 55 and 150. right? The goal is going to be 150, but I think, Alyssa, you can safely go as low as 55. Just please don't do it regularly. Why would you play with fire? Before I close out, one quick comment. Did you notice in the question from Alyssa, I'll throw it back up real quick. In my response, I got lucky. I nailed it. Notice I said I can't help but think the RDA would be the absolute minimum. Do you remember what the RDA is? Remember, it's 0.4 grams of protein per pound. So isn't it funny? We just established using the study and 15% as our minimum that Alyssa should be at right around 55 grams a day as her rock bottom floor. And yet using 0.4, which is the RDA, times, again, I'm being hypothetical, let's say Alyssa weighs 150. And again, do this exercise in your head. Well, it turns out that 150 times 0.4 is 60 grams. So again, the RDA and the 15% of 1,500 calories worked out to be within 5 of each other. So whether it's 55 or 60 that's nominal. We'll call that a wash. But I do believe that the RDA, then you should take that away as your absolute minimum. Whatever the RDA gives you, don't go below it. But on that note, I really appreciate the question. Guys, notice great questions like that turn into videos just like this one. Please do hit me up with any questions, concerns. I love doing the digging, and I have the cycles to pull it off. So if you have any questions you want to know about or you want to challenge me on anything, please do. On that note, don't forget to hit the like button. Please do subscribe if you haven't yet, but I'll see you in the next one.